as we are waiting on Shelby to come around to the front here, why don't you say hello?
Hello. Merry Christmas. No. Happy
Halloween.
Halloween. That's it. Yeah.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. That's it. Yeah.
We are here with the Ivan Files, and Shelby and I have gotten handouts today for reference. So, I mean, we are definitely sharpening our edge.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Right.
This is pretty great.
The main reason for that is I can't read my own handwriting, which is like there, see? So I had to remember what a lot of that was.
That's a sign of genius, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a sign of genius. Or some kind of sign. What I thought we'd talk about today, since this is the last blog before actual election day,
Dun,
Nice.
dun, dun!
Next week, it's the week.
is, thanks, Bill Murray. Talk about some of those things that people might be having a difficulty in deciding which way to go.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that is very prominent is what women are allowed to do with their bodies. Do women own the bodies, or does somebody else own the bodies?
Mm.
And so far, it seems like somebody else is
Trying
holds
to.
sway over whether a fetus can go to maturity and be born or not. And so I wonder what you guys think about that. What do you want to give those people out there on the blog this morning?
Oh boy, this is a heavy subject. This is some heavy subject matter, isn't it? We're
Okay.
in the hot seat. Do you want to go first? Do you
I'll
want me
go
to go?
last.
You'll go last. You'll go last. Yeah, so I mean, women's bodies. Who gets the say is what this form says in front of us. Government says do, equality or free self, do Marx or Adam Smith or combo. So we'll get into that latter half later. In regards to women's bodies, like I think that this is a huge conversation in the election right now. Mainly because of the overturn of Roe versus Wade from the federal court, sending it back to the states. I think that what we need to do as a society is allow women to make the choice for their own body. That is what I believe. I think that what's happening in terms of our world is that it was basically ratified in the law with Roe versus Wade from a federal level, right? That was the law of the land for many years. I don't know the number offhand. And then to see that overturned and sent back to the states seems like a step backwards for many, because the society has built with a federal mandate in mind of Roe versus Wade. And then to go backwards on that and send it back to the states feels like we're going backwards for some women represented in the United States of America.
Yeah.
I was pregnant when I was in high school,
Mhm.
and I chose to have my child. And I think that the murk is that religious groups, as well as people that want to stand on a box and preach, are saying that abortion, let's use the word that we're talking about here, abortion is, against God, it's against this, it's against that. My concern with abortion even being a topic in politics is that we have grabbed onto these women's rights as a real battleground.
Mm-hmm.
And what people are failing, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, to remember is that the after effects of having an abortion, regardless of your situation, are very traumatizing to the female. Having a child in high school is very traumatizing to the female. And so each female is built very differently in that to have their, you don't think so, but to have their rights taken from them to make that decision, knowing that either decision that they make is going to cause trauma for them. That being said, it's very difficult for me to understand why we have weaponized abortion so much in religiously, politically, things like that, as well as, women that can't get pregnant, why that's not covered by insurance. That fight has also been a part of this. And I really wish, from a female's perspective that made a certain choice, I also have some dear people that I know that have made the opposite choice. I don't look upon them differently. I do know that as much as it changed my direction in life, it too changed their direction in life. And I guess I don't know why government is even near this. That to me is the religious people coming in and placing their strong views, and the majority of those people that are placing those strong views need to look farther out into their community of people, because there are people that have been affected by that they maybe don't know, or that they do know and they're covering up for and hiding so that they can stand on this box. I believe that to be the same with these politicians. Do I believe that the woman has the right to decide what to do with her body? Damn right. Now, if a government was to tell me what I could or couldn't do with my body, that would really feel very 1940s and 50s to me. And the men in our society, again, this is the Ivan file, so I can say what I want to say. The men in our society are not held accountable for their actions. So if in fact two people come together and a pregnancy evolves out of that, why then are we not temporarily capping off these men so that when they're out there shooting it around, they cannot produce children? I mean, that's seriously. Why then are we not going to that angle? Why are we not then saying, well, from about age 14 to 18, all boys will have a temporary clip put in them. This is the same subject.
Yeah.
It is just being approached differently. And instead, we look at the woman and the fact that she's the one that carries the child as the one that is put in a position where she has to now defend what she's going to decide for the trajectory of her life. Now, do I disagree with abortion being used as a birth control system? Absolutely. Do I disagree with abortions? You've got that first time that you decide on the trajectory of your life, right? I disagree with late-term abortion for certain. I don't know that any of us get to decide when that child is a child. So I think that for it to even be near this presidential race is a shame.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed for our politicians that it is even coming out of their mouth. And I am saddened that we are going back in time so aggressively. It for me, nobody has come up and suggested that if you keep this child, that we are going to put this child through college, and we're going to make sure you have groceries, and we're going to make sure you stay clean and sober during this time that you are a mother. Instead, we're going to say you can have assistance, We're gonna make you feel pretty shitty about it, but you can have assistance. You're gonna have to go through the lines. We're not gonna really help you though much, and we're really not gonna care about this kid after it's born, but we get to hold that baton up and say, another life saved.
Yeah.
Or did you?
Hmm.
My 2 cents. It's bigger than the baby. It's bigger than the fetus.
Yeah, let me pose a problem to you, a situation where, say, a married couple, or maybe not a married couple these days, and the female gets pregnant,
Mhm.
and now she wants to have an abortion.
Mhm.
And the male is kind of flustered about it because it seems like part of it is his option too.
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
I think that when you start getting into the weeds about situations, you are in trouble. I think if you start getting into the weeds, if you start saying a married couple that isn't in the position to have a baby right now is better or worse by making that decision than a young kid that was sexually molested, I think that that is a place that you have to stay out of the weeds in. Again, those people that make those choices, whether they choose to keep or not keep, have changed the trajectory of their lives. And the female especially will forever live with whatever choice she makes. And she can come solid with it. She can come peaceful with it, but it will still be a piece of her for her entire life, whether she keeps the child or she does not keep the child. Now, does the man have a right to say this? We're not talking about government at that point.
No?
We're talking about partnerships.
Yeah.
So we're talking about government here and keeping government away from that decision. We're not talking about partnerships. We're not talking about boyfriends and girlfriends or parents and children or molestation. We're talking about government. And government belongs nowhere near abortion or women's rights as far as I'm concerned. As a woman
Yes.
that's been through it.
Yes, I mean, I hear where you're coming from, but I think like the government still has to make a decision on whether they allow it or don't allow it, right? Like that is essentially something that falls onto the government, and it's been one way for a very long time, and the recent overturn has caused this to be back in the conversation.
I guess you're right, because the
Right.
government was a part of it by doing Roe versus Wade.
Right.
So, but then,
But I mean, I think that in the country of America, we are very big on our civil liberties, right? On our freedoms. And I think that this does directly impact a woman's right to make a choice, that an unmakeable choice.
An
right?
unmakeable
You're making the
choice.
wrong choice, whatever way you go.
you're making
Like,
a
there
tough
is no
choice,
way.
not
You're-
a wrong choice. You're
Correct.
making a tough choice regardless of what choice you
Right,
make.
and I feel like there's always going to be looking over your shoulder and wondering,
Mm-hmm.
like was that the right choice? Was it not? I think like in the scenario that you bring up between a man and a wife, I think that comes down to a conversation that is hopefully had long before marriage is solidified, right? In this situation, what are we going to do? Are we going to have children? What does that look like? Like I would hope some people that are getting into these relationships are mapping this kind of trajectory out before getting into that scenario. Now, shoulda, coulda, woulda, in hindsight, like that doesn't change the situation that some people are in. Does the man have a right to step in? I think the man as a partner has the right to support and sway the decision in whatever way they think is the best for their family unit. But ultimately, it does come down to the women's right, in my opinion.
It does.
Yeah.
And, in the perfect world, we would say, and in most great situations, it's true that the father is the father forever. I'm also a product of that not being the case.
Right.
And the father can bail, and they do.
Yeah.
And so the woman, and again, you know, you could get some really shitty emails about this blog, but, you know, because I am not going to be that person that stands up and says, get an abortion. I'm also not going to be that person that says, don't get an abortion, because it's none of my business what she does.
Right.
I can support and love whatever decision she makes. Then I can support and love her if she makes the decision that is or is not what I would make. And then I can support and love her if she has that child. But I better have the same amount of support and love for her if she has that child. That means support her through motherhood. As I better support her through a devastational loss.
Right.
It's a very,
Sticky wicket.
it is a sticky wicket, but the freedom is the key here.
Yeah.
The freedom is the key here.
It's so you're saying that the woman has the freedom to choose one way or the other.
Yeah, and if a woman in a marriage was to choose that, chances are very high that marriage will eventually go away.
Decay. Yeah.
So that's a whole different deal, right? But like for my particular case, you know, all of my options were weighed.
Yeah.
Adoption, abortion, having the child. And they were weighed alone. I did not weigh them with anybody.
Yeah.
And I researched them all.
Yeah.
You were encouraged, I think, to have the baby.
After I made the decision is when I shared the information.
Yeah.
Because I did not want other people's opinions, because even at 17 I knew ultimately it's going to fall on me.
Yeah.
So, you know,
For
even though I had an
18 years.
incredible support
Yeah.
group, I was a very lucky girl, right? They would have supported whatever I chose. But I knew I had to make that decision. Each woman knows they have to make that decision on their own.
So, Ivan, you have a note here regarding Marx or Adam Smith. Expand on that a little bit.
Because you have that right next to the woman's body.
Marx. Oh, that was about the kind of government you want. That's what I intended that for. As Karl Marx was, he was a communist. So that was the kind of ultimate socialist, if you will. And Adam Smith was the guy that proposed that we do what we do in self-interest. Well, he was a Scotsman. He wasn't an American. Anyway, that was what I saw as the two different people.
Gotcha.
And it was in relation to government and I can't even read the typewriter.
So-
Equality.
Well,
Yeah.
two different government styles or philosophies here,
Yeah.
right? You know, Marx is kind of like, these are the rules, you'll stay within the confines of those rules.
Yeah.
And Smith is a little bit more loose with the interpretation of the law and what the law should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably that's so, yeah. I would say so, yeah.
Well, you know, I feel like you know, there's good and there's bad to both, to be honest with you, because we as a country have taken, opinion only, we have taken our freedoms and taken them to, social media is a perfect example, we've taken them to an all-time low, and
Yeah.
we're a very entitled country. And, you know, we have the idea that we should get wealthy on the backs of other people, as opposed to, you know, my favorite phrase is, to whom much is given, much is required. You know, the human piece gets pulled out of it when we have all these rules and regulations. If you have more than your neighbor, your human side should say, you know what, I'm going to take some groceries next door.
Yeah.
Not forced to, but your human side should say that.
Yeah.
And instead, the human side says, screw them. They should go get a better job.
Yeah. I think like in comparing these two like philosophies, and I don't know them as well as I probably could, obviously, but you know, I think that government is ever evolving. And I think that as we continue to bump into these issues that were not on the forefront when the Constitution was ratified so many years ago, right? I mean, we didn't have social media. We didn't really have the technology for abortion in a safe manner by any means, right?
No, they had
So-
lights, candles for lights and shit.
Yeah, like I mean, it's a different world in which these philosophers were attacking these subjects. And I'm a firm believer that the government has to evolve with the times. And I think that's the biggest issue with our government today. You know, with the upcoming election, there's two very different candidates out there. One's much more buttoned down political. The other one's a little bit more radical, says whatever he wants to say and gets the splash from the media. But essentially, we have to evolve the entity of government to work for us. And I think that you see these different issues that these candidates are pushing, and there's two very different, it comes down to what's important to the people at this time. You know, what I've been really diving into is why are some of these individuals following the cult of Trump? Like, what is it about him that is so attractive to so many people? What is it? And I think he really gets to the core of the red tape and the regulation that our government is putting on its people is almost too much. It feels as if it's too burdensome for us to move forward in different entities and different reasons, which I think is a great point. You see the other candidate talking more about this kind of subject matter because of the way that federal law was overturned 6 years ago or whatever the number is. So I think we're in a weird scenario in this country because there's very polarizing parties. But I think what our North Star needs to be is what's the best for our people? What's the best for government? And you hope that those politicians have the people's best interest in hand, but we're proven time and time again that that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And I think that is the most devastating part of politics in our society today.
I've never had an election I've been voting for 40 years now. I have never had an election.
Yeah.
40 years. I'm 58.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've taken every election very seriously. I've always done my research. You know, I don't share my opinions much. I mean, you kind of know my opinion, but
Well.
but you're like my child. So,
Yeah.
but you know, I this is the first election that I can recall where I had true angst in every, except two, in every vote I cast. In every vote I cast, I knew that people, because I do what you did, you know, you don't look at just self, you have to look at community.
Yeah.
And to do what's best for the longevity of the community, you may have to vote against yourself on certain things to have the betterment of the community, because we are all members of communities and we
Right.
have to vote for community. And that's what I hope people choose to do before they cast their vote, is they look at community. They don't look necessarily at self. And within that, they will find that they will succeed in the community. Personal opinion only.
Yeah.
How about you? You've been voting for 72 years.
Forever. Yeah, forever. Yeah.
Have you had any trouble with this election, this vote?
Yes. Yes. My impulse is to vote for none of the above,
Mm-hmm.
but that isn't an option. and we don't get to do it again. And I'm concerned that either one of those is has a unsteady. For instance, one of them advocates for a year in jail for burning a flag. Well, that's not American at all. It isn't American to burn a flag, but on the other hand, it isn't. You don't put somebody in jail because they burn the flag. And the other thing is that often when they consider more jail time, somebody has to pay for that. Yeah, it takes 3 squares and concrete and steel to build the jail. Seems to me that putting up more jails is, even though our population would consider that to be a need, I don't think.
But do you educate them so that they don't, do you
Yeah.
attack that end of it? Do you?
Yeah, there are some things that they could advocate for more education, more rehabilitation, even though rehabilitation doesn't necessarily work very well. A judge told me one time that class 3 felonies pay because you go to jail and you steal a TV set and fence it and get some money for it, and then you get to spend the money on drugs or whatever it is you're gonna do, and that's not good. So that's a wrong way to consider as that's the end point. It isn't the end point. The end point is we've got to do something about the people that are doing that kind of thing. And I'm for more well.
Education and apprenticeship and things like that?
Yeah, I'm for that. Apprenticeship is really important because even though the union might be against some of that, because a person earns a living while doing that, and then they'll be on the road to making a living and learning a skill. And I think that's a good idea.
Well, and we may be working our way away from that 4-year degree being the end-all be-all to
Yeah.
get the big job today.
Yeah.
We have to go back into that, in technology world, it's really not the requirement anymore. I mean, it is to be a doctor and things like that, and a lawyer and things
Yeah.
like that, but to go get a business degree or things like that, it's a little harder to say that's important for you to have when you can get all the information at your fingertips right there on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it comes back to how are citizens occupying their time, right? And if it's easier to go steal a TV than it is to work a week to make that same economic impact, then that's something that we need to look at, right? We need to put people on a path where they can, where they choose to make a decision that is not harboring their, or what's the word I'm looking for? harm their fellow man. Like that is what we need to do. Like if I go and steal that TV, it's essentially coming out of that business's pocket, right? So that is essentially something that is taking out of somebody else's pocket to put in your pocket.
Which is gonna affect every other person that buys a TV, because that person that just lost that $1,000 on that TV is gonna put $10 on every other TV until he makes that $1,000 back.
Right. Exactly. So I think that like what we need to do is more rehab, sure, but like a lot of those individuals that you're trying to rehab have learned some way, shape, or form, whether it be selling drugs or stealing or whatever the case may be. They've learned that from somebody else, or they've been so desperate to be forced to make that decision.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to find a way to get individuals on a playing field where they can be lucrative, successful members of society, where they're helping build community rather than damaging community.
And I think it goes back to, I agree with everything that you just said. And it goes back to changing the world one person at a time. You have the ability to mold 2 people, right?
Yeah.
So we have to take it more seriously within our family environments
Yeah.
to change within our family environment, and then that changes, and then that change, and eventually, if everybody is changing that family environment, but then you have to look at the people that don't have the ability to change their family environment because they're so downtrodden.
Yeah.
So it's so big that
Yeah.
you almost can't fathom it.
It's difficult. You know what keeps coming to mind for me is a podcast I recently listened to. It's called Search Engine, and what they do is they're kind of looking at like billionaires in our society today, and they're looking at like the history of income tax and how to tax the rich. And essentially what's happening today is like once you are ahead of a company and you have stock in a company that's worth a ton of money, those individuals aren't receiving a salary.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're leveraging with the bank a loan for them to live, and they're getting a salary of like $1 a year. So therefore, they're able to dodge these big tax brackets because that's the way the system is set up currently. And essentially what this podcast looks at is it looks at like, okay, do we need to be reining in these billionaires, these huge multimillionaires, and redistributing the wealth, or having them pay their fair share into society? And I think it's something that definitely has to be looked at. I think it's going to be really hard to get the spotlight in that direction because of the lobbyists, because money talks, because you're buying off politicians, because you can pay the best CPA or lawyers in the country to protect you. Like there's a lot of stuff there that really allows that light to never be shown in the corners of the internet. And the story kind of came from an individual who worked for the IRS, and he was essentially a whistleblower. He released like all the tax returns of the top 100 wealthiest people in the country, and he ended up going to prison. But everybody that kind of talks on the subject is like, should he have gone to prison? Probably. He's releasing personal information, but he's releasing it to kind of show what's happening with this upper 1% of society, and is like kind of bringing light to the fact that something has to change. And it's really interesting because like when we're talking about this lack of choice, it comes back down to lack of economical paths to allow your family a future that succeeds. You would never steal a TV if you knew that you would wait 2 weeks, make that money, and then go buy the TV. You wouldn't put yourself at risk. But because we have this economic disparity in our society today, like it puts these people at the lower income in a very hard scenario where they have the choice of, well, I'm going to go sell drugs or I'm going to go steal, because that makes more sense than me working 40 hours at McDonald's to barely make ends meet at home. Right? So it's like a societal breakdown on how things aren't working for a large community in the United States of America.
Yeah, lots of problems.
Yeah, very much
Lots
so.
of problems, lots of things to fix.
Yeah.
And I hope that we are going to get ourselves on a path to do that.
Yeah.
Hope so.
So how do we do it? The election is coming up. So those are things to think about
Yep.
When you vote.
when you vote,
Mhm.
Yep.
or that you have thought about when you voted.
Yeah. or society's just going to fall apart and then we have to rebuild it from
Fall apart.
scratch.
We're gonna have
You
to
know what I
rebuild
mean?
it.
So
And besides that, the aliens are coming, and there's going to be another meteor, and you know what? I mean, it doesn't really matter. The aliens are coming, and none of this really matters. So
dude, I think the aliens are sitting back like, oh boy, they got this thing pretty messed up. I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know if we can help them at this point. Yeah.
Not much.
Yeah.
good talk today, Dad.
Yeah, well done.
And none of these views will be held against us.
Because we said that. That's
Because
for
we
sure.
said
None
that.
of these views will be held against us.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't believe anybody's view is right or wrong.
Right.
But please send him an email.
Yeah, send an email.
Talk to him about Shelby's views today,
That's right. Oh yeah, no, nope.
but not my views.
Yeah.
Anyway, everybody vote.
Yeah.
Do your research. Do your research. Vote for who you choose for, and be careful sharing who you vote for with different groups.
Oh boy, isn't that the truth?
Yeah, yeah.
Want to say goodbye?
Bye. So long for a while, for a week anyway. Remember that the last blog before voting day. So, put your 2 bits worth in there and we'll see where it comes out.
Good luck.